Okay, go ahead, guys.
Hi, my name is Jessica.
Hi, I'm Matt.
Hi, I'm Chase. Hi, I'm Sean.
All right, now to start out, I want to talk to you guys about where I was at 19 September 2012. I was at aerosol school. In the middle of aerosol school, I'm hanging out of a plane, looking down. And as I'm looking down, all I can do is jump. Heart's pounding, it's crazy, everything's blowing around you, and I jump. And I hit the ground. That technique is practical to this conversation just because of Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore. He discovered the theory of aerosol school for a military technique in Vietnam era. That's what led to a lot of key battles in Vietnam era where we won. The reason that's practical is because of military technologies. Military technology has always been advancing, always been improving, mainly because of war times. As soldiers in this room, you understand as well that every war that we participated in, we have to overcome our enemies. With some technology, some technique, that's different. That's how this conversation is practical to this speech that I'm about to give to you. Again, Dr. Edward Teller, the Manhattan Project, and the hydrogen bomb. All three subjects in one sentence is what I'm going to show you today on how it advances in military technologies. Dr. Edward Teller. Dr. Edward Teller was born in 1905 in the country of Hungary. During this time, there was a big conflict which led to Dr. Edward Teller maybe not getting the proper education, but he did not speak until the age of 4. The reason he didn't speak until the age of 4 is because first his father and mother were German. They didn't speak very good German. That's why he was very hesitant on how to communicate. So he just figured, I'm going to keep playing with numbers. That's what he enjoyed and that's what made him comfortable. But his family was also Jewish. So during the conflict in Hungary, he fled to Germany to study physics. The reason he fled is because the conflict was too big at that point in time. So he came to Germany to study physics, in Munich, Germany at that, where Oktoberfest is going on right now. It's practical, but hey, you know, it's Oktoberfest. Stationed in Germany is very great for us, but that's where he was at. In 1930, he received his doctorate degree. And this is the same point in time when Adolf Hitler took command of Germany. He was a Jewish family member. He understood that here in Germany, he probably wasn't going to get very many jobs being Jewish. So he, in 1939, 9 years after he created his very first paper, titled Hydrogen Molecular Ion. This plays a huge role in coming up. So just remember, hydrogen molecule ion. That was the very first paper and the only paper he wrote at a doctorate level, and it's published. This information was from achievement.org. That's where I got all my research from Dr. Edward Teller. But like I said before, in 1939, he realized here in Germany he wasn't going to get very many jobs. But he did receive one job. That was from the University of Washington back in the United States. He said, it's getting too crazy over here, I might as well. So during 1939 and 1940 era, was about to start World War I, getting into World War II. And President Roosevelt received a letter from Albert Einstein at that in 1939, titled The Destruction That Germany's Progressing. What that means to President Roosevelt was that Germany's doing something. So he required more information and then understood that it was an arms race. The first one to create the atom bomb. During that time, President Roosevelt called all the scientists all together in a room, which started the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project's very first name was Destruction, was in the title, and they knew that that was not practical. The Germans were going to find and figure out what they were doing there. So they called it the Manhattan Project because of the location. Today, there's been at least 5 confirmed locations, but it's still top secret, so we don't know all the locations. The one that's practical to us is the one that's in New Mexico. That's where Dr. Edward Teller worked in thermonuclear division. During his time in the thermonuclear division part, as you can see on your papers, the picture in the top left corner was his ID card getting him into the Los Alamos. That period of time, he was not the head of the department. That made him very angry, but he still knew that he's trying to get to the top because of the conflicts that he got in Hungary, his experience in Germany. He wanted to get to the top. So what did he do? Well, while he was discovering the Manhattan Project, they came up with the very first bomb in 1942. The very first bomb is not on your paper, but the next two were. The very first one was Little Boy, who happens to be on the top left corner. Little Boy was the very first atom bomb that was set off to scare Japan during World War II. That scared them, but when that bomb went off, 100,000 people died that day. Dr. Edward Teller was a main researcher of that bomb, but he still did it because President Roosevelt and everyone else, it was for America, which is the military strategy at that time. That was the only way to stop them, but it didn't stop them. They kept coming. So the second bomb, the second atom bomb that was created was called Fat Man. What is located right underneath, as you can see in those pictures, the room that the bomb is in is not necessarily small. So the bombs were huge bombs. And that's what Dr. Edward Teller did during the Manhattan Project. And both those bombs went off in the August of 1945. So we went from 1930 to 1945, only a decade and a half. That's military technology can happen one day and it can advance as fast as an atom bomb 15 years later. But there was conflicts during Los Alamos at this time, where Dr. Edward Teller, he was, again, like I said, he was trying to get to the top of his department. He came up with those two bombs that went off, but he still wanted more. So he wrote and documented this thing called the hydrogen bomb. The hydrogen bomb was first developed during the Los Alamos before those bombs. He was laughed at and out of an investigation at that period of time. The head of the department was actually a Soviet spy. Practical only because during 1949, 4 years after the atom bomb went off, there was another scare. The Soviets were also developing bombs, and they also were at that point in time during that investigation, the Soviet spy delivered the idea of a hydrogen bomb to the Soviets. So Dr. Edward Teller was laughed out of the room for the same idea. During that time, he only took one job at the University of Chicago until he was called back by President Truman. President Truman gave him a call, called him up and said, hey, look, now the Soviets are developing a hydrogen bomb. We're sorry for what happened. Come back in. He was very upset at that point in time. So these sources I'm getting this from are from Lloyd titled The American Way of Life. That's where the atom bomb ideas came from. And Lennox, Someone Could Destroy the World. These are journals that were published at that period of time. And that's why Dr. Edward Teller received many awards because of his role in the Manhattan Project, because of the hydrogen bomb. As you can see from that last picture on the bottom, that is the hydrogen bomb that went off. That was the very first test. It was 20,000 pounds of TNT. I hope that I can tell you I hope I explained to you exactly who Dr. Edward Teller is. He received in the Boston Globe in 2003 the President's Citation for the Medal of Freedom, which is the highest award you can receive. He died just recently, but that's the story of Dr. Edward Teller, so thank you for watching.